Reynolds. We're busting through the lies and deceptions to break open the locks on love. This episode is titled and about Awaken to Create the New. Awaken to create the new. It's quite present and demanding. Not demanding. What's the word, Brian? Invigorating.
Good one.
It's like a quantum leap in our mindfulness practices that and that's what's required for creation of the new. So it's not a term we've just made up. Creation of the new, as that exact term is mentioned 27 times in A Course of Love, and create the new 12 times, and variation of those words uncountable times. And I'm really grateful to have Brian Longhurst here to help me unpack this topic, because Brian's written 7 books, been on this podcast twice already. And I decided to give you this instant introduction today, Brian, and let your wisdom unfold through stories and our discussion. And the place I'd like to start is many years ago, in 1966, I believe it was, Jesus asked you a very important question through your mentor, Olga Park. Would you tell us about that? Let's start there.
Okay. Well, I used to visit her several times a week, often midweek after work. And at the end of each visit, we would go to her prayer sanctuary for prayers as I was making ready to depart. And on this occasion, November 66, Olga said to me, "The Master is here and he's speaking to you. Because you may not yet be able to hear him speak, I will tell you what he is saying, and then you can respond." So she said, "The Master is saying to me, what is your desire?" 4 words. Well, that rather intimidated me because I was pretty green about these spiritual matters. I was about 20. And so I stumbled my way through the best answer I could come up with, which is, well, to serve you according to your will. And he said, actually, that isn't the way things work, which took me by surprise, I have to tell you, because that's what I believe the church will tell people. He said, you have come into this world bringing with you potential for certain things. My job is to help you to develop those potentials so that in due season you may bring forth much fruit for the kingdom. Well, that stayed with me and still has, and that was 56 or 57 years ago. So, and things have gone forward since then. He then appeared to me a few months later in January 67 in a wondrous experience that has stayed alive within me as if it was yesterday, even today. And we've been on this journey, one-on-one journey, ever since. And I do want to emphasize that such a one-on-one journey is available to everyone. There are no exceptions to this. However unworthy we may feel, Jesus isn't interested in our sense of unworthiness. He wants to say, come on, let's get this show on the road. He's all for it, and he will help us. The key to that is being willing to follow his lead.
Comes back to that question. I know. So let's go back to the question. What is your desire? It's a question we can all ask ourselves, isn't it? Because to awaken, to create the new, if we want to awaken, to be a part of creation of the new, or to actively cooperate to create the new, then our desire or our willingness, the term willingness is used in A Course of Love more often than
Yes,
desire, but
yes,
let's just say they're very similar. It's
yes.
it's a
They
question
mean
we
the
have to
same thing.
ask ourselves.
Are we willing? If we are willing, we will receive the help. We cannot do this on our own. How can a newborn baby feed itself or do anything? And we are babes in the wood when it comes to our spiritual awakening, our spiritual awareness, the reality of eternity. So we need help, but that help cannot be given without our asking for it. And the reason for that is so simple. It is because we have God-given free will to continue in our slumbers, our dream of being separate from our source. With help from spirit, from the realms of light. For me, it's been with Jesus because that was the focus of my interest, my desire. And he came to me because I asked. I asked for him to appear to me, and he did. And if anyone who asks sincerely, humbly, spiritual sincerity, he will come. He's already there, but our willingness opens our receptors to awareness of his presence. It's all so straightforward, and we've got ourselves in a complete muddle.
Well, we have been deceived and lied to just a few times about this over thousands of years. So, um, if you're not
Yes,
feeling the straightforwardness of it and you're listening in, don't worry. It 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 really does come down to asking, and it is really simple, but I we do understand that it has been made very complex and has been
yeah.
held apart from us. So you mentioned that Jesus appeared to you, and you've written about that in your first book. But he, could we say, is it the correct term or the right words to use to say he appeared to you in his resurrected form?
He certainly appeared uh, to my awareness of him as he would have been in his embodied life. And because people that he manifested to after his resurrection recognized him and said, oh, this is Jesus. So he must have appeared in his resurrected form in a way that was identical to his form before the crucifixion. So that is how I saw him. But it was much more than that because I saw his aura, the light, the golden living light, which expanded out beyond him as far as arms could reach, and probably much further than that, but that's what I saw. And I realized the brightness of the light was so great that it's like looking at the sun. You'll damage your eyes if you stay looking. Well, I realized many years later that we don't actually see with our eyes, we see with our mind. And in our embodied form, the things around us, physical things that we see, use the mechanism of our ocular faculty, our eyesight, but that then transfers an image to our mind. Well, when the apparition that we're seeing is beyond the capability of our bodily sight to discern, it goes straight to the mind. So it's mind to mind communion or joining. And I realized that many, many years later, that's how I was able to see him. I thought at the time, I'm seeing him with my eyes because that's what most of us think we're doing all the time. So we can
So
all have awareness.
yeah, yeah. And some people hear and some people feel. And some people sense. I don't often see with the visual. I have another really dear friend who sees amazing things. Um, as you said, not with his eyes, but he gets these incredible images that describe. I don't get that. I feel, but I'm just pointing that out so that if anyone's listening, they don't feel like they're unawakened or anything like that. We all receive slightly differently.
Yes.
I wanted to say something else about that. I wanted to ask you, how did it feel when you, there's two things actually. I wanted to ask you how you felt when you saw him. And I also wanted to clarify the use of the word mind, because it can get us in tangles on this podcast, because many people think of the mind as the brain in their head. You know, that's the part of us that does the overthinking, the judging, the comparing, the attaching to, the all the things that get our knickers in a twist.
So to speak.
Whereas I'm pretty sure you're talking about the one mind, the one
Yes.
mind of unity consciousness, which is an
Universal mind.
entirely different thing.
Yes. Mind is eternal, brain is temporal. And when we lay aside our body, the brain disintegrates with the rest of the body, but the mind continues. And I've had so many experiences of people who've laid aside their body and they're still active in their mind and moving forward and rejoicing that when they thought they'd actually died or about to die, they're actually still alive and in better shape than they were 5 minutes previously or whenever. Yes, so
Well, we talked about that at length in the last episode, which was called Help for Lost Souls.
yes, yes.
So,
Anything more?
yes, what did it feel like when you first saw Jesus?
Well, because I'd been asking him night after night for several months and not being aware of it, when he actually was suddenly there was no mistaking. I wasn't fabricating this in my own desire thought. He was there. He was 4 or 5 paces across the room from me in the corner, and he began walking toward me. And as and he came right up close, less than 30 centimeters from me, and he stopped right there. And we were eyeball to eyeball. The love that was emanating from him and which I was experiencing as he started to move toward me got more and more powerful. And it was an orgasm of the soul. It was far more than any such bodily experience. And that is all encompassing from head to toe. And I was a quivering jelly, not of fear, but of love beyond any earth life experience. And I, as I looked into his eyes, which were, we were eyeball to eyeball, and as I looked into his eyes, I was looking into eternity. There was no ego in those eyes at all. He was completely gone from egoic consciousness. That's why he can help us to escape, because he said in the Bible, I have overcome the world. And he certainly has. And he can help us to overcome the world if we're willing to follow him. We're willing, if we have the, here's that word, willingness. If we have the desire or willingness, that will enable us to stay in a state of connectedness with him. We don't know how it works. We don't know how to do it. So by willingness to follow him, it just happens. And it is our willingness that authorizes him to keep moving things forward for us. So his appearances and the things he said to me were moving things gently forward. There is absolutely nothing to be fearful about. Jesus is love, nothing else, just love. And he's gentle, he's fun. He's got a fantastic sense of humor. And why wouldn't he have? Humor lightens us.
I've seen evidence of his humor. You find it tucked in pages of books and cheeky little synchronicities and I don't know, but often it's fun.
Yes.
Mm.
Olga Park used to say that Jesus is the Lord of surprises, and he loves to surprise us with joy.
Yes. Yeah.
And he will, if we're open. If
Mm.
we can push to one side all that learned fear that institutionalized religion loves to inculcate, fear of God. We must
Oh,
live in the fear of God.
I learned
What?
something interesting today, Brian. Google, Google the search engine, counts the number of times someone searches for the word fear and the time the search phrase fear of God exactly the same. In other words, it doesn't differentiate.
Right.
So
Okay.
it is to me that's it is what's the word? Um, Encouraging that same stance of religion. Fear is founded in the fear of God, which is one of the greatest lies and deceptions of all
Yes.
time.
Yes.
It's totally ridiculous. I'm sure it states in A Course of Miracles, but it definitely states in A Course of Love that God is love. Creational energy is love energy. It,
Yes.
there is nothing to be fearful of. And I sound a little frustrated. It's just frustration from the lie. It's lies and deception.
Well, the likes of you and I are here to help people to see through the lies, see beyond them to the love. And Jesus is like God, who is love, nothing else. Love just overrides everything else. And the fear goes out the window when we have an experience, a mystical experience of the holy presence. It's,
Mm,
I just long to share this, shout this from the rooftops.
very good. Because we want to awaken to create the new.
Yes,
Yeah, I think there's a really strong burning desire in many people right now to answer that calling. The words you used earlier were to develop, or Jesus used with you rather in 1966, to develop your potentials to bring forth the fruit for the kingdom. I mean, that's quite a biblical kind of use of words, which was where you were at that point. But to sort of translate that into everyday language, it's to develop that inner creative expression that's within each of us and is unique to each of us, that
yes.
is just wanting to be nourished and expressed and delivered for the benefit of everyone.
Hallelujah. That's
So
why we're here.
that's
That's
why we're
why we're
here.
here.
Um, so there's a really beautiful quote that you wrote from in your diary of Christ communicant um, on your website from quite some time ago that's linked to this. That's why I talked about the resurrection a little bit. And we talked about, overcoming the world. So I think, the world of illusion is what we're overcoming. And
Yes.
so would you like to read the quote? Because I know you have it at hand, or shall I?
You read it.
Okay, I think I have the slightly longer version, but that's okay.
That's okay.
So it's from April 9, I think, 2000
Oh,
and
that's from Easter.
April
If you like,
12th.
if you'd like me to read that, because I've shortened it a bit, I've extracted the key bits. So it's not the full message that Jesus spoke to me. So, okay, let's read that. This was on Easter Day 2009, And Jesus told me, resurrection can only be or appear to be after there has been death. Yet have I not stated from the beginning that there is no death, unless you are espoused to illusions, to dreams of unreality? Whosoever lives and believes in the Son, that he is the Son, shall never, can never die. Thus, ultimately, can there be no resurrection, but only an awakening from the dream. Let our gentle call therefore be, arise, shine, for thy light is come, and the glory of the Lord, that's God, is risen within thee. And that's a quote from chapter 60 of the book of Isaiah, which states, is risen upon thee. But I was prompted at the time to change it to within thee. So that was what you were going to say, isn't it, Helen?
Yes, it was.
Okay. Well, this is important because
Very.
the word resurrection tends to call to mind of bodies, but
That's
it's not
right.
the body that's going to resurrect.
Another
It is
lie
the
and
mind.
deception.
Yes, it is the mind that is going to awaken, not resurrect. Awaken is, and that's what's happening right now, awakening to the new creation that we all actually already are. And this was initiated by Jesus for humanity, his brothers in the sonship of God. That was initiated by Jesus at his resurrection, which had to be something that people could see. So he presented himself in a form that their bodily senses could recognize, but that's a symbol. The reality of the awakening or resurrection of the rest of us is not to do with bodies, but awakening of our mind. A lot of people might say, well, I don't get this. This is above my ability to comprehend. So what I'd like to do is share an analogy, which is around us. We all experience this analogy every year, and that is the caterpillar metamorphosing into a butterfly. Now, that is a biological process, and the awakening or metamorphosing of humanity is not a biological process, it is a spiritual process. And so we will still, in our bodily form, and that's happening during our continuing embodiment, people will still recognize us as they recognized Jesus walking down the street. They knew who he was by his form. But what they didn't see or know or understand was what was happening, what was the reality of his inner being, his mind and heart, unified in relationship that combines discernment and love and compassion and caring, all the things that we identify Jesus as being. And that's what we all already are, but are living. We are homo slumberous, meaning we're sleeping man about to awaken. And that's happening right now. This is occurring even as we speak. So the excuse me, the awakening is happening at the level of mind. The soul is already awake, and that appears while we're in form anyway, in our heart or around the heart. But the mind is what's sleeping and dreaming dreams of fear, dreams of misperception, dreams of separation.
Are we getting tricked up on the use of the word mind? Don't you mean the brain? The
Well, it's
brain
the
is
slumbering,
dreaming.
it's
Yes,
the
yes.
slumbering mind. not
Yes.
the awake mind, as when we wake up in the morning after a night's sleep, having dreams. The dreams seem real while we're dreaming them, but in the morning we realize none of that was real. And that is happening at a level that is above the three-dimensional consciousness. So it is the illusorily separated mind that is dreaming or pretending to be separate from our source. The awakening mind is awakening to the new creation that we already are. Now, it
And
could be
unity
very
consciousness with our source.
definitely, it could be helpful for us to ask ourselves, at what point does the caterpillar, or has the caterpillar become the butterfly? It has to have been before the chrysalis opens, otherwise we wouldn't see the butterfly, we'd see something less. So the butterfly has already metamorphosed, the caterpillar has already metamorphosed into the butterfly before the chrysalis opens. Well, now, we, humanity, slumbering humanity, are in the chrysalis of forgetfulness. And so that's why we're not seeing all the manifestations of the glory of God and love surpassing everything else, all the judgments and grievances, because we're still in the chrysalis. But the new creation that we already are is already extant within the chrysalis of forgetfulness. And all that is now required to expose the new creation that we are, excuse me, is to awaken, open our eyes, our mystical eyes, our spiritual eyes,
And our
to the
hearts.
reality, and our heart, to the reality that we are. The world may say, well, that's very, very difficult. Actually, it's very, very easy. And the key, in my discernment, is abandoning judgment, abandoning grievance, abandoning guilt, abandoning fear. Well, the world will say, all very well to say that, but how do we do it? Fear is everywhere around us. Everything in this world is the consciousness of fear.
Well,
But we don't have,
in the unawakened state,
yes,
all that is known is fear,
yes, yes. This is the
fear-based.
consciousness of fear. Yes. Well, we don't have to do it. All we have to do is be willing to ask Jesus to accomplish this for us. He told me this scores of times over the decades. It is our willingness that authorizes him to accomplish it for us. Without our willingness, he can't help, because we have free will, God-given, immutable free will. And he's waiting with infinite patience for all of us, each of us individually, to say, okay, Jesus, I can't handle this alone. I'm making a complete hash of it. So I have heard it rumored that you know what you're doing, and and that you're empowered to help us. So, okay, I'm surrendering. Please help me. It is my heart's yearning desire to awaken from the dream of fear and death to eternal reality of being the love that God created us to be.
I'm glad you
So,
used the word yearning, because I think it's, it's a quite, we talked, I just want to sort of backtrack and use some more, do some interpretation for those who aren't sort of orientated around a strong Christian vernacular.
okay.
So you talked about resurrection isn't the body, it's the mind. It's not the physical body. It's the mind, the one mind, the realization that we are an
Yes.
individuation of the one mind and we are eternal. But
Or
sort
we
of a
could say
more,
the consciousness,
yeah,
the,
yeah.
the consciousness of mind, whole mind, unified mind.
And there's sort of a term that a lot of people listening will be familiar with is this acceptance that we're a spiritual being in a physical form, or a spiritual being having a physical experience. That's uh, that's sort of easy to accept, I suppose. And then it's the embodiment of a broader understanding of that, or a broader um, living as the spiritual being, not as the
Yes,
physical form, which is that's the shift of awakening. And I was really glad you used the term yearning, because I think we, we all experience that yearning as the kick up the bum, shall we say, to get
that's
moving.
vernacular.
Yeah, that is vernacular, but yeah, it's rather it'd be just as equally as unpleasant as a kick up the bum, because that yearning period is often with depression and longing, and we don't know where to find answers, and we're how else to say it, we're lost trying to find these answers to questions we don't even know how to ask.
Yes, yes, that's
So
crucial.
if anyone is experiencing that, you're at the start of the trail. Keep going, but
A lot of
ask for
people might,
help.
many people might think, well, there's a lot of new learning that I've got to start on. But actually, what we need to be doing is unlearning.
Unlearning.
We've unlearning all the conditioning that we've been inculcated in from teachings, false doctrines,
Lies and deceptions.
and there's a there's a vignette in my first book entitled "The False Doctrine of Sacrifice of Salvation." The false doctrine of sacrifice as the path to salvation.
That is so
That's
false.
that in Judaism and Christianity, that is the central tenet of, as far as I know. And people believe they're sinners. Well, we've sinned in time, but time isn't real. We've made some mistakes, and we can allow Jesus, if we are so moved to do, to correct our perception of what we've been told we're sinners. And we must plead for mercy from God, who's about to throw thunderbolts at us.
Oh,
That
that's
is
the other.
absurd.
Yes, well, those thunderbolts are meant to be the judgment, God's wrath and judgment.
Yes.
Oh, that is another massive lie and deception.
How can love, unconditional, total, divine love, have wrath or retribution? It's like we want to punish our children for having a bad dream. What? We want to comfort them from having a bad dream, not punish them. And we, humanity, as we appear in this world that we've fabricated through the belief in separation, is just a dream. And we're awakening from it. And that's what's happening now. And the new creation is what we already are, and are awakening to realization of that. We can't do any of that without Jesus. He's the instigator of this process. This is nothing to do with religion. We don't have to be a Christian. We just have to be willing. And there are lots of people who say, well, we're in a mess. I don't know anyone who wouldn't think that this world is in an almighty muddle. And it seems to be getting worse. Well, that's the chaos before before the awakening to the remembrance, the awareness that we already are the new creation. And that new creation is like Jesus, which is love, compassion, caring, all the good things. We could write on a sheet of paper, we could draw a line down the middle, write all the good things on one side and all the bad things on the other. We just want to eradicate all that bad stuff that we believe is what we are. It's only goodness, and we're pretending to be sinners. We're pretending to be crooked, whatever. We can give all that up. It's easy. It's much easier to open to love, and all the dark stuff just disappears as the love, which is the same as light, shines it all away. Simple.
I
I
think
know
that I think
yeah.
there might be a few people listening who aren't thinking it's so simple.
I know. And I can
So,
say it because I've been doing this for 56 years. So it's
yes,
become easy. And it wasn't easy for me at the start, but I was blessed by awareness that Jesus was with me and was helping me, guiding me. And he will be our guide only in response to our asking. That's all we have to do. And he will become, he's already our guide, but are we going to join his tour? We've
I
got to
think,
be willing to join.
yes, yes,
Willing, having the desire. And this isn't a 5-minute job. This is a commitment, a total commitment for as long as it takes.
yes, very
I
much
do,
so.
I do feel that there are vast numbers more in the process of awakening to awareness of the new creation that they are than has ever been the case previously, even a
Yes,
few years ago. But it's all been building up to this. It's as
Ye
if we've been moving along at a gradual pace, hardly discernible rising. Perhaps your listeners won't be able to see this, but if we're moving along, very slowly rising, we're now at the place where this is happening. The
it's become
ascension,
exponential.
yes, this is the most exciting time ever. Nothing like this has ever happened on planet Earth or anywhere before. And we're here now to share in it, rejoice in it, and help those of us who are a little further behind, a pace or two behind, to catch up.
And cooperate in it. Hmm.
Yes,
Uh,
all
Let's
who
talk
are willing.
let's talk a little bit about the separation and the unity, just as a uh, with the intention of helping those who are not finding it quite as easy as you are, Brian. Um, and
I'm
that's
trying not to be smug.
no, you're not smug. You're not smug at all. It's just this is your way of life now. And as you said, you've been practicing for decades. So, um, uh, we are here. There's many episodes on the More, all, in fact, all the episodes on the More Love podcast are here to encourage us forward, to reassure us that we're not alone, that we're not separate, and that love is the answer and that love is real, even. It's just been covered over and locked away with all these lies and deceptions that when exposed to the light, they just disintegrate into the nothingness that they are. It really is that simple. But
Yes,
however, I remember when I was yearning, it did not seem simple. So if we're a spiritual being having a physical experience, when we're orientated in that physical experience, you're you and I'm me, and you know, this is me, the physical body is me. And I start at birth and I end at death. That's the illusion, isn't it? That's the
yes.
perceived separation.
Beginnings
That's,
and endings.
yeah,
There's no beginning or ending in reality. It's all
no,
eternally now. forever.
And I think, if we really did begin and end at birth and death, we would have no ability to remember past lives. We'd have no ability to experience deja vus. We'd have no ability to even meditate, or there'd be no telepathy between people. There'd be no ability to sense someone's state of mind or atmosphere.
Or aura.
Or aura. I mean, none of that would even exist if we were truly separate. So that's why it's the illusion. It's why it's the unreality, because we perceive it to be real, but we have all this evidence all around us that it's not real. So,
and people who are steadfast in their commitment to remaining slumbering, like how many thousands of near-death experiences, which ought to be retitled near life, because we are dead here, but
that's right.
moving to an experience of life.
I called them compelling
thousands.
love experiences.
Nice one. And yet there are people who are steadfast in their determination to ignore them. You'd think that people would say, I want to hear about people who are having near-death experiences because I don't want to die. And the idea of death terrifies me. And we're all pretending.
This brings us to another one of the great lies and deceptions, that we only get to heaven when we die.
Yes.
Oh, that's a big one. There's a beautiful line in A Course of Love. It's in chapter 9, verse 41. I've just written a note, but it's a paraphrase. Jesus says the words "rest in peace" weren't for the dead; they were for the living. We're meant to rest in peace and joy and harmony while we're living.
Yes, absolutely. We've got everything upside down, back to front. Amazing.
There is it's a verse from A Course of Love about the resurrection that I'd like to share to sort of wrap that up. And then I want to talk about time and space, because there was a really great question that came in about that. So let's do the quote about resurrection. It's from A Course of Love, Treatise 1, Chapter 8, verse 5.
Okay.
As I no longer suffer the separation. So just for the listeners who aren't familiar with A Course of Love, remember this is Jesus speaking to us. As I no longer suffer the separation, you need no longer suffer the separation. Even though the resurrection returned not life to the form I once occupied, it returned me to you in the form of the resurrected Christ, who exists in all of you, bringing resurrection even unto your forms. I became the Word incarnate upon my resurrection rather than upon my birth. This will seem confusing given your definition of incarnation as the Word made flesh. You took this to mean that flesh took on the definition of the Word or the Almighty when I became flesh and bone through birth. But neither my birth nor my death were consequent with the Word, as the Word is I am. The Word is life eternal. My resurrection brought about the Word made flesh in each of you. You who have come after me are not as I was, but as I am. This does not make sense, even in your human forms. Does this not make sense, even in your human terms of evolution? You are the resurrected and the life.
That is powerful stuff. The sad thing about even statements like that is that ego distorted religion has people who've turned away from religion because they've seen that it's a sham. That's institutionalized religion. Excuse me. People who've turned away from it will say, well, this is all very interesting, but do we know whether Jesus ever even lived? Isn't it just all mythology, which is just what the ego wants? So that's a fantastic statement that you've just read. But even still, there will be people who'll say, well, it's just words. Well, words only become the living word here in our heart when we accept them as having true living meaning. It's not the words on the page that are alive. They become alive when we accept them into our unified heart mind. And people who are not willing to do that will still see the words that you've just read as just words. Anyone can make up words. That's the thing. When we're ready to accept that what Jesus tells us is reality, and it applies to us, each one of us individually and communally, then it becomes alive within us. That's where the word becomes the living word. Not many people know that, as Michael Caine would say.
Mm.
There we are. That's powerful stuff, what you've just read. May it speak to the hearts and minds of all who are truly willing for it to become their reality.
Mm.
It will if they're willing.
It goes back to, you know, if anyone's ever read Mary Baker Eddy's textbook, Science and Health with the Key to the Scriptures, she talks about over and over again, you know, being this, just can't bring in her exact words, but, you know, earlier I'm trying to tie two ideas together. You know, I talked about it's a very common thing for people to say, I'm a spiritual being having a physical experience. And I
Yes,
said, we need to be the spiritual being, not the physical experience. And then we talked about the physical experience, you know, when we're orientated that way, that's the idea of
yeah,
separation. And now we're talking about the living word, you know, being the spiritual being.
yes.
Our our life experience is orientated as the spiritual being. First and foremost, the physical form is sort of secondary. It's not the primary thing anymore. Um,
And without the desire for that, what you've just said, it won't happen. The desire for it initiates, activates, opens the door to the help that we have to, without that help, we can't achieve this for ourselves. Just the same as a small child can't achieve the things that its parents do for it. And we have to be willing for our elder brother, Jesus, to accomplish this for us. He's told me that hundreds of times. I am your all sufficiency. Well, there are a lot of people who say, well, just a minute, I am my all sufficiency, and I'm not going to let some interloper have his way with me because I'm in charge of my life.
Are you
Well,
revealing another lie and deception?
possibly.
Well, it's the, you know, where the whole separated world uh, idolizes that sense of individual control over your life and
Oh, yes.
making it on your own and being strong and you know, conquering life on your own 2 feet. Um,
And asking for help or even accepting help is for wimps,
yes,
failures,
yes. And
losers.
that's what I was alluding to when I was teasing you about revealing another lie and deception.
Yes.
But it's true, isn't it? We're not alone. We're part of unity consciousness, where Jesus is, where his family is, where um, people might use the term the realms of light, or the beings of light, or the archangels, um, and more, many more.
Yes. 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 In a much larger sense, you and I and all who are listening to this, everyone around the world, everyone, no exceptions, are Jesus's family. We're his siblings in Christ, brothers and sisters in Christ. The fact that most of us, as yet, are still pretending, playing the game of pretend, that I'm a separate individual with his own agenda, and nobody's going to take that away from me. That we just have to be willing to let that go, that mistaken idea. We're not alone. We have never, ever been alone, and there is no way that we can actually become alone. We can fantasize about it, but fantasies are not real.
And let your yearning, if for those who are listening and have experienced that yearning to go home, or that yearning to connect, or that yearning to know that their connection to creation, that is the evidence that it's impossible for us to actually be separate.
Yeah. Without asking, it's not going to happen. But people will be truly surprised that if they can summon the inner courage to ask with sincerity and humility, they will be astonished at how rapidly, not always rapidly, sometimes it may take a day or a few days or a few weeks, we will find experience of the help that we're asking for, even though we don't know what form that help will take. It will always be in a form that has meaning to our perceived present experience, and much more than that, because it will often surprise us how much more in depth the help that comes is than we even thought existed. These are real statements of truth. I can say this from the authority of experience. I've experienced these things, so I know that they, as I said earlier, Jesus is the Lord of surprises, and he loves to surprise us with joy. Forget
Mm.
not to laugh, he counsels us in A Course in Miracles.
Well, how can he not surprise us with joy? He doesn't, in the realms of light, there's no fear, there's no sadness, there's no loss, there's no grief.
Yes. I had an experience with the passing of a chap called Gordon, who was about 93. He absolutely did not believe there was anything beyond our embodied state, and that when we breathe our last, that's it. So when that happened, I decided that I would commune with him, mind to mind, and he was bewildered. What's happening? He knew my voice, even though I was sending it mind to mind, not vocalizing it, because he didn't have the bodily ears to hear it. So after a few minutes of helping him to understand that he really is still alive and that there is no such thing as death, later, his older brother, whose name I just forget at the moment, and who had passed away quite a few years before Gordon, Gordon became aware of this brother, and they were seen dancing, hooting and hollering, with joy that they were reunited, reconnected, a thing that Gordon thought would never happen. And his joy at this awakening to the beginning of his journey to reality, eternal reality, Well, he couldn't. That joy was for real. You can't make up that kind of joy, dancing and shouting with delight. So this happens. It's going to happen to everyone who doesn't believe there's anything more when they find out there actually is. All my fears and terror at the idea of dying, there was no need for it. And they will want to help those of us who are here in a body, but who are still terrified of dying. They would want to help those people to say, look, there is no such thing as death. But people who are terrified of dying are usually not open to hearing loved ones in spirit from reassuring them.
They're
So in
not
the
even
meantime,
open to hearing loved ones in physical form reassure them. I know.
that is true. That is
I
true.
I very much know this. So let's use the story about Gordon. You know, his brother appeared to him not long after he passed. So I'm thinking about time and space, Brian. They're just
Oh
not
yes.
real, are they?
No, no, they are not.
So one of the questions that was asked in anticipation of this conversation was, how can Jesus be everywhere for everyone all of the time?
Oh yes, that
And
was
I'd
from
like to
Andrea,
add
wasn't
on,
it?
doesn't he get tired?
The answer to that is actually very straightforward. Uh, he appears to us, each individually, as being just there for us, whereas in reality, he's just there for us, all of us, all the time, because he's left behind separation. And there is no separation. We believe we're separate. So, oh yes, Jesus came to me yesterday. And what a wonderful thing that was. But he's there all the time with all of us because the connectedness is nothing to do with bodies, it's to do with unified heart and mind. And he said to me around that time, 1968, I'm connected to everyone all the time. There is never a moment. So don't go out looking for people to share your story with, because you don't know their hearts and minds. I know the hearts and minds of all, and I will bring to you all who are ready to hear your story. And I will put in your mouth, I will inspire you and put in your mouth the words for you to speak to their hearts. And that happened. I'm sure you've had people appear. I think you described such an occasion earlier on, that there's a sudden awareness that this person is ready to hear some of the story. So you tentatively start sharing some of the realities of eternity. And if the person is open and responding and receiving, then it can continue for as long as they are ready. But standing on the street corner, proselytizing, doesn't work. It only makes people embarrassed and they'll want to cross the street and walk away without hearing. Jesus doesn't stand on the street corners proselytizing. He knows our hearts and minds. This is a rather circuitous answer to Andrea's question. But he's with us, each of us, at the same moment. And we can be with everyone else at the same moment simply by saying, okay, Jesus, you seem to be where it's at, and I'm willing to follow you because I trust you. And then he will lead us to the place where we can have awareness of anyone, everyone. It seems like, oh, that was that person, I was thinking of them, and then I had an email from them, or a WhatsApp call, or they contacted me by telephone. And how often do we say, I was just thinking about you? Well, that is the beginning glimmerings of remembrance of our connectedness. But Jesus has remembered the whole kit and caboodle. He's remembered it all. He knows all of us. He knows our hearts and minds, which we don't know. We're beginning to get a glimmering of what our hearts and minds are all about, which is love and truth.
I think our heart never forgets. It's just the brain in our head or the ego mind that limits the receival of
Awareness?
the awareness, the receiving of our heart.
Yes.
To go back to Andrea's question, we talked about, being a spiritual being in a physical form. We talked about being the spiritual being as opposed to being the physical form. Now, I
Yes.
think if we be the
Excuse me.
spiritual being that we are, then we no longer have, or we are no longer limited by our spiritual form. And this is what the demonstration of the resurrection was all about, to
Yes. Beautifully
demonstrate
stated.
that the physical form is unnecessary for life. And so if we meet, how could Jesus be there for all of us? Well, in our true form, in our spiritual beingness, we are unlimited just as he is, and we become one in that unlimitedness.
Yes.
Let's make up a few words, shall we?
Definitely. I'm all for it. So
Are there-
where we're at in that context may seem very microscopic, whereas Jesus is aware of all of us, every moment. There's never a moment when he's not aware of you and me, not just aware, oh yes, there's Helen, oh yes, and there's Brian. He's aware of what's in our heart and mind, which we have no awareness of. So we're at the very early stages of that. But the new creation that we're becoming, and which is reaching a crescendo of universality, which we'll all have that awakening awareness that we're connected. We're all one. And that oneness is love. There's no judgment, no guilt, no grievances, none of that. We've made all that up. None of it means this. None of it has any value. We're valuing the valueless. So we're at the beginning of this. But because things are speeding up, the celestial speed up, I've heard people refer to it as, the awareness of everyone, everything is becoming increasingly to the fore of our consciousness. It won't happen if we don't desire it. And the ego loves to put what ifs and if onlys in our mind, but that's irrelevant. With God, all things are possible. We can say to this mountain, be removed hence to yonder place, and it will move. That's a quote from Jesus in the Bible. And in a course in it may have been in a course of love, one or the other. He says, when I made that statement 2,000 years ago, I was speaking literally, not metaphorically. Now, if he says that, we can be assured that it's actually true. And since mind over matter is reality, not the other way around, excuse me, all things are possible if only we can believe. And it's our unbelief that keeps us from experiencing limitlessness.
I think it's, in the introduction to the podcast, I use the term quantum mindfulness.
I
And
like it.
yeah, I like it too. But what I meant was this: mindfulness isn't positive thinking. I mean, positive thinking is a part of it, but this quantum mindfulness is the attention of where our mind is, attention, mindfulness of being the spiritual being. It's putting,
Yes.
it's using mindfulness to choose who we want to be. Do we want to be our true selves, or do we want to be our little illusory physical selves? Our true self embodies the physical self. It's not one or the other, so to speak, but there's a different prioritizing. There's
Yes.
our spiritual self has to come first, or there would be no physical self.
Exactly. And a body without the spirit or the life is not a living being. It is only the life within the body that animates it, and that is our reality. It's so straightforward.
Oh my gosh, we could be talking for hours. I really don't know how long we've been going, but earlier you said we were talking about time and space, and Jesus knows all of our hearts. And there are many people now bringing words through from Jesus. And I think some people find that a little confusing. Marie Perron, who brought through A Course of Love, is one of my ultimate favorites. All my listeners know I love that text. Uh, I don't think there's anyone who knows me who knows I don't love that text. But I also love the words that you bring forth. And I also love the words that Tina Louise Spaulding brings forth. And I also love the words that Anne Olson brings forth. And I could go on.
Yes.
There's blurred out in the background is my bookshelf of all my favorite books. But yeah, this is the point I'm trying to make, that the words are streaming forth to support us in as we awaken to create the new. And
Yes.
there is no limit. There is no specialness. Just because you are bringing forth the words, or Tina Louise Spaulding, or Marie Perron, or Anne Olson, just to name a small number, there is no specialness in that. It is just a clarity of mind. It is a mastering of quantum mindfulness to
Yes.
allow that stream of consciousness to come through. And
Yeah. And it takes a leap of faith. Now,
yes,
most people would be very fearful of the idea of launching into space, let's say off a high building or a wardrobe or whatever you want to think of, with somebody there waiting to catch you. Maybe that person isn't going to catch me. And maybe that person, Jesus in this context, isn't even there. So it takes a leap of faith. And without that leap of faith, we'll stay stuck where we perceive ourselves as being. Once we take that leap of faith and we found that we have been caught, we haven't been dashed to pieces on the ground, then we can say, why did I wait so long? I could have done this sooner and been in joy with less fear ahead of that. Well, if hopefully some of these words that we're exchanging and sharing will cause people who are hovering on the brink to say,
yes.
okay, I'm going to take that leap of faith. Here we go. Jesus, I hope you're there, because I'm going. Catch me. He will never let us down. Never. He will never, ever let us down. If only we can trust and believe.
Sometimes I
That's it.
joke and say, there's a reason the words faith and trust exist in the language.
Thank goodness.
But, just I just I like to keep things sort of really practical and really relatable to our life experience. And if
Definitely.
there was no one there, we would not yearn,
I like that.
because we can only yearn for what we can remember.
Yes. True.
So it's
Yeah.
all there within us. It's all there without us, shall we say, not
Around
without
us.
us, outside of us, through us. It's ever present.
Yes. Yes.
Oh my gosh. So let's have another quote from my favorite textbook. Um, Creation of the New. This is Treatise 4, chapter 12, verse 34. Creation of the new has begun. We are an interactive part of this creative act of a loving creator. Creation is a dialogue. Creation, which is God and us in unity, will respond to our responses. We will respond to what we envision, imagine, and desire. Creation of the new could not begin without you. Your willingness for the new, a willingness that included the leaving behind of the old, a willingness that included the leaving behind of fear and judgment and a separate will, was necessary to begin creation of the new. Your former willingness to accept the old, but kept creation's power harnessed to the old. Does this not make perfect sense when you realize that creation, like God, is not other than who you are? How could creation proceed on to the new without you?
Wow. Wow, wow, wow. I couldn't have said it better myself.
No, me neither.
Yes. And the great thing about it is Jesus uses words purposefully, mindfully. And if we're willing to allow that, we'll begin to see much more of the actuality of the words that he's using purposefully to share with us. Those words, people will read a statement like that, and then they'll move on. But a statement like that is worthy of rereading, musing upon, and letting the heart be involved in the musing, because then we can start to see the greater reality.
I want to touch on a few more questions before we wrap up. So there's a lovely question from Susie. So by handing it over to Jesus or the Holy Spirit, any situation where I'm confused or unsure, are we not handing it all over to them for their care and guidance? But are we also joining the all? She says, have I understood that correctly? I had never thought about that, but by getting myself out of the way. So the question's a little bit jumbled up to me. However, to me, she's on the right track. You know, when we are
Definitely.
confused and when we're unsure, we're in the ego thought system where
Yes.
lack of certainty is its grip on life, really. You know, without
Yes.
confusion, the ego doesn't exist.
Yes. Well, Susie's absolutely spot on. I think the wording or the order of arrangement of the wording is a little bit confused, and I don't mean that in any judgmental sense.
No, nor did I. Sorry, Susie, if you're listening.
Yes, she's absolutely spot on. Um, it there's nothing really to add in the way of explanation because she's said it. Well done, Susie. Bless you, sweetie.
To relate back to earlier in the conversation, I really like how she's used the terms by getting myself out of the way. That's the
Yes,
quantum mindfulness. That's the being, the spiritual being,
yes,
and and disregarding the confusion and not giving it any more attention, not being confused, just being the true self. I
yes.
mean, it takes practice and diligence and what's the
And getting out of the way, letting
tenacity.
our little self.
Yes. And it's little decision. It's a little moment by moment thing. This isn't a thing we wake up in the morning and say, I'm out of the way. I'm done. Thanks for coming.
Yeah,
It
it's a
doesn't happen.
wrap.
Yeah, that's right. I don't know about anyone else, but it did not happen like that for me. It's
No,
it's a moment by moment thing that we experience Moment by moment. How do I say it any other way?
Well, trust is a moment by moment thing. We take a step and there is ground under us to receive our foot. So that wins us some trust. We then take another and another, and every time we are met with solid ground for our next forward step. And we can envision this into metaphorically as our spiritual journey, and find that the next step we take and each next step that we take has been met, and we haven't fallen flat on our face. We haven't made a complete fool of ourselves by that trust. The trust is responded to. If we don't trust, there's nothing to respond to. But if we trust heaven, eternity, Jesus, God, the realms of light, all who are awake to reality, the reality of universal love, they will never let us down, ever. They will never, ever let us down. That is an absolute certainty.
One of the really important words you used just then was response. So there's one of my favorite lines in A Course of Love is what the only response to love is love.
Yes.
And
Yes.
this is what Susie's getting at, by getting herself out of the way, she's not responding to confusion with worry or anxiety or doubt. When we respond to love with love, we do just that. I'm running out of words, Brian.
And that does seem incredibly hard, impossible even, to someone who is still consumed by doubt, by
Yes.
uncertainty, by fear.
But we just chip away at it one little decision at a time, one little response at a time, one little micro meditation even at a time,
Yes.
one little micro asking, followed by a giant asking, and then lots of little askings. It doesn't matter so long as we're always reaching for it, I guess, reaching for love, reaching for that unity,
Yes.
reaching to be our spiritual being.
I'm just going to see if I can find yeah, just bear with me, please. Oh, here we are. This was a Diary of a Christ Communicant entry from April 2010. And I said, "Dear Holy Spirit, sometimes I wonder, do I really know how to let go and start giving myself to you?" At this point, he interrupted me loudly and emphatically. "Don't start questioning. Questioning is an ego pastime. Remember that and simply start surrendering instead." But what's the difference between questioning and asking? Jesus tells us we should ask and it will be given us. Questioning is doubting. Doubting is unbelieving, an affirmation of commitment to littleness. Asking is desiring to know, a request for help in remembering what is already known but temporarily forgotten. Asking is seeking, inquiring, opening, allowing, trusting, believing. Questioning is doubting, dismantling, destructive, negative. I said I had never realized that they were two distinct things and are really opposites. He says, "There is much you have not yet realized or remembered, but that does not matter," smiley face. Surrender does matter. It is imperative to spiritual awakening, and without it, ego will retain its leasehold in your life and keep you separate from your true being, self, self with a capital S, Christ self. That will
Spiritual
keep you,
self.
yes, that will keep you from home, Papa, your brethren in the sonship, truth, perfect love, inner peace and joy. I said, wow, that's a comprehensive list. And he responds, it is everything. It is your source, your eternal reality, your very being. Affirming is building, reassuring, strengthening. Practice affirmations for your focusing, centering, uplifting. Say, I am, just as Papa created me. I am loved unconditionally and eternally, every moment. I am forgiving of myself and my brothers. I am loving. I am compassionate. I am caring. I am free. I am trusting. I am trustworthy. You can add to the list as inspiration moves you, but always keep it positive, and it will always be truthful and uplifting. Remember, doubt is the ego's dismantling device. So that really puts the finger on the state of consciousness of most of humanity now, as Homo slumberus. It's doubting. Questioning is doubting, but asking is desiring to know.
It
So,
it it reminded me, to bring it back to sort of a real life, tangible kind of a thing that's relatable. That the documentary about Jessica Watson, who sailed around the world when she was just 16, has recently been released.
oh
She was
yes,
she was the Aussie teenager who, sailed around the world. It was amazing.
yes.
She, uh, I'm just using her documentary as a recent example. Many people will have watched it. It's marvelous, actually. Um, but just like she set off, she didn't know if she could do it. She she hoped she would come home to her family, and her family hoped she would come
Wow.
home to them. She was full of teenage confidence to do it. Um, her maiden voyage was cut short with a almost disaster. Um, the but it's just like, I'm sure all of us can think of an example of when we were young and full of enthusiasm to do something before we really could, or for those of us who grew up in the bush, we can think of many examples. Riding off into a paddock and not knowing how to get home. I can remember my mother saying, just find a fence and follow it if you get lost. Sure, Mum, whatever. Bye. But
Now, what is that girl's name who sailed around the world?
Jessica Watson.
Jessica. Imagine how many from the realms of light were with her
Oh,
every
yes.
step of that journey,
Yes.
upholding, uh, encouraging, giving her that sense of, yes, I can do this because I've come this far. I'll take the next step and the next
Yes.
step. Uh,
And
but the help was always there. Whether she was aware of it or not was secondary. The fact that it was there and is evidenced by her successful, safe circumnavigation and
oh,
return home.
yes. Yes. I highly recommend the documentary, actually. And I don't want to ruin it, but the love really did save the day. There's
Okay.
Yes, I feel I shouldn't say anything more. It's so let's come back to the questions. And it comes back to the quantum mindfulness that we're talking about, the micro commitments, the step
Okay.
by building our faith step by step. And these words are from Fran. And she's talking about how she's going through A Course in Miracles at the moment when she wrote this, and this little excerpt, this realization, I think is is really relevant. Most, she emphasizes, most of the stress comes from me, with another emphasis, and the patterns and beliefs and past experiences I held on to. I find myself whispering to myself, I am determined to see clearly. I am determined to see with the eyes of Christ. And I remind myself that I can escape the world I see. That she's really wrapped up our conversation, hasn't she?
He has, yes. That wasn't a question, that was a statement. A
Yes,
very
sorry.
definite, yes. Well, that's all right.
Yes,
I did
yes, it
ask
was.
if anyone wanted to make any observations or questions, and she's made a very powerful observation, and that we can all choose first to be at that place. And when we've made that choice and are steadfast in that choice, then the progress begins immediately. We may not arrive at our destination because it's a journey. Oh, and that reminds me of something else Jesus said to me. I'm thinking about 1978. He said, I can be as a staff to assist you in the steep places, but I cannot be your feet. This is your journey, and you must take the steps. This is the only way you can complete the purpose, the journey upon which you have set out. So we have to take the steps, but he's there beside us every step. There is never a single step when he's not with us. How comforting, how reassuring is that?
It is. So this brings me now to John's comment. He said, biases that come from our subconscious mind, baggage that we carry from previous lifetimes into this lifetime. How do we overcome these thoughts from our subconscious minds in the dream?
Well, the answer to that is very easy. And the answer is we don't, we cannot without help. But with help, all these things just happen. They get, it's like the more the light shines, the more we allow the light to shine within us, the more those falsified ideas are simply shone away. And if we're striving and struggling and fighting and wrestling to get rid of these things on our own, it's not going to happen. We're going to add to them because we're focusing on them, focusing on the details. When we allow spirit to be in control of the details, we can focus on the principles, and the principles take care of the details. They're gone, but we can't do it of our own self-will.
Detail is another what's foothold of the ego mind, isn't it?
Oh, definitely.
It
Yes,
loves detail, whereas spirit's all encompassing. If it's all encompassing, there's no need for detail because it's all encompassing.
exactly. And Jesus said to me, I said to him, being in charge of the Great Awakening must be a massive task, a massive responsibility. No wonder you needed to be fully awake in order to be able to take that on. And he said, actually, there's nothing to it. It's really straightforward. Once we have remembered who we really are, then the principles are self-governing. We allow them, and all the details just fall spontaneously and freely into place and are dealt with. Well, Jesus may have said that about himself, but we can all say it of our own self because we are like him, pretending not to be, of course, but we are like him. We are the child of the creation of God, one, absurdly pretending to be many, disparate, disparate and desperate.
And disconnected.
Yes, fun and games, eh? So I hope
Well,
that helps, John.
Well, I think it the thing that popped into my mind when I read John's question was, just a moment before that, you talked about the journey. It's a journey, and we might perceive it to be over multiple lifetimes.
Yes.
Um,
And
and
for most of us, it has been so
yes,
far, but all that's changing because this is what's happening. The ascension is taking
yes,
place,
the ascension and the awakening and the
the awakening.
saturation of light. Uh, but it also reminded me of, just earlier in our conversation, we talked about those micro commitments, those micro moments of deciding to not engage with the ego thought system. To,
Yes,
those micro choices require our willingness to repeat them over and over and over and over again.
yes,
But
yes,
luckily for us, it snowballs. So, but it can
yes,
snowball in either direction, can't it? Our ego, if we repeatedly commit to the ego thought system, to the confusion, to the doubt, to the I don't know, the darker ideas, that's what snowballs. But if we repeatedly commit to the light, to faith, to like Fran's doing, I am determined to see clearly, that's what snowballs.
yes,
And we can snowball the light even faster when we ask for assistance from the realms of light.
yes, yes. Wonderful.
So
Ask,
really,
ask and you shall receive, seek and you shall find, knock and it shall be opened to you. Now, the initials of those three words, ask, seek, knock, are ASK. Ask. Whatever way we cut it, we've got to start asking, not questioning, but asking.
yeah, and joining. Well, I think, Brian, maybe it's time. Maybe we've discussed all that is to be discussed tonight. How do you
Yes.
feel?
Well, I have to say, you are an amazing interviewer. You keep the thread moving forward and have done an extraordinary job of keeping it together. I salute you for that, truly. And it's gone incredibly well. I've loved every minute of it.
Ah, thank you, Brian. Well, it's been most enjoyable, but most importantly, we give this episode to help those on their journey. Let it
Yes.
be reassurance. Let it be the kick up the bum I was talking about. Let it,
But
let it.
a gentle one.
Yes, that's right. Yes, it's um, mostly reassurance and encouragement. That's the word I was reaching for.
Yes,
Encouragement.
yes. I'm a great one for encouraging because
Me
people are
too.
so full of doubt. And doubt needs to be gradually moved to the side by encouraging people. I have a friend in Israel that I talk to most weeks on Skype, and he's been on this journey. He's about in his mid to late 50s. He's he's Jewish, but he's been prompted within recent years to want to get to know more about Jesus. So he saw my interview on Bat Gap and said, "Oh, he seems to know about Jesus. I must connect with him." So he was saying a few months ago that he still has this sense of unworthiness, and how can he get past that, because it seems to be keeping him blocked from the freedom to soar. So there's our friend behind me, and I saw him come up behind my friend in Tel Aviv, and he put his hand on his shoulder and he said, "You are worthy." when I told him that, oh, he was really moved by that. And that's true for everyone. There is no one for whom that statement does not apply. Anything that Jesus says to anyone is always applicable to everyone. And how can that be possible? Because we're one.
Yes.
I feel another hallelujah coming on.
I feel another episode coming on. I'm trying to wrap this up, Brian, and there's a whole plethora of beautiful conversation opportunities.
Yes. Okay. So, thank you so much, Helen. It's a joy and a delight and a pleasure to communicate, to commune with you, to share with you. Thank you.
Thank you too. I have no more words than the ones you just said. Yes, and thank you.
Okay. Bless you. Until next time.
Yes, until next time, tune in for another episode of the More Love podcast at another time. Thank you, Brian.
Bless you. Thank you.